He caught a stranger's fall and never recovered from it. One second, she was upright. The next, her wheelchair was slipping sideways through the chaos of a crowded cafe, and Grayson Hale's arms were around her before his brain had finished forming the thought. She grabbed his shirt. He grabbed her. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Then she looked up, and he looked down, and something passed between them that neither one of them had a name for yet. He didn't know who she was. She didn't know what catching her would cost him. But the accident had already happened. Not the fall, but the meeting, and there was no taking it back. If this story already has you, drop a like and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The alarm went off at 6:12, same as every morning, and Grayson Hale lay still for exactly 4 seconds before he moved. 4 seconds was how long it took him to remember what day it was, what needed to happen, who was asleep in the room down the hall, and what that small person needed from him before 8 a.m. 4 seconds of stillness, and then he was up. Feet on the floor, body moving, the machine of daily life engaging with the reliability of something that had no choice but to keep running. He was 32 years old, and he moved through mornings like a man who had long ago stopped expecting them to be anything other than functional. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building in the Ridgemont neighborhood, a part of the city that wasn't fashionable but wasn't falling apart either. It existed in the comfortable middle distance of urban geography, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' first names but not their business, where the corner hardware store had been there since 1987, and where the cafe on Alderman Street made the best plain drip coffee in a 10-block radius without trying to be anything special about it. Grayson had moved here 3 years ago when he needed a place that felt like it wouldn't ask too much of him. It had been a good decision, maybe the best one he'd made in a long time. His son's name was Miles. Miles was 6 years old, gap-toothed since December, and possessed of an opinion about nearly everything. He had his father's dark hair but his mother's way of going quiet just before he said something that actually mattered. He slept on his stomach with one arm hanging off the bed, which Grayson had photographed exactly twice, once on a Tuesday last March and once in October. Not to share anywhere, just to keep, just to have. Grayson made eggs. He made them the way Miles liked, scrambled but not too wet, and put them next to a piece of toast cut diagonally because Miles had informed him 6 months ago that triangles tasted better than rectangles, and Grayson had not found a compelling argument against this. "Dad," Miles appeared in the kitchen doorway with his hair doing something complicated on the left side of his head. He was still in his pajamas, which were printed with dinosaurs in various states of geological era inaccuracy. "Is it a school day?" "Tuesday." Miles absorbed this. "Is Tuesday a school day?" "Every Tuesday has been a school day since September." "I know." He climbed into his chair at the kitchen table and pulled the plate toward him. "I just wanted to make sure this Tuesday wasn't different." "It's not different." "Okay." He picked up his fork. "Good." This was how their mornings went. A small series of checks and confirmations, Miles making certain the world was still organized the way he'd left it, Grayson confirming that it was. Grayson understood it. After a certain kind of loss, you needed the structure of ordinary things to hold you upright. He'd needed it too. He still did, if he was being honest with himself, which he tried to be in the early morning hours before the day got loud enough to make honesty inconvenient. He dropped Miles at school at 8:15, same as always. Miles had a friend named Connor who waited for him by the front gate every morning, and watching them crash together with the particular physical enthusiasm of 6-year-olds who hadn't seen each other in 18 hours. Grayson always felt something move in his chest. Not pain exactly. Something older than pain. Something that had been through pain and come out the other side a little raw but still standing. He walked to the cafe after drop-off. He did this 4 days a week. It was 20 minutes on foot, which he preferred because the walk gave him time to settle into himself before the workday started. Grayson was a structural engineer with a small firm, the kind that took on commercial renovation projects, and the occasional residential job for clients who needed something specific done to a building that wasn't cooperating. He was good at it. He'd chosen it partly because the logic of structures appealed to him, the clarity of what held and what didn't, the honest physics of load and support. Partly, too, because the job let him keep his own hours, which mattered when you were the only adult in a household with a 6-year-old who occasionally got fevers on Wednesdays. Alderman Street Cafe was called Alderman Street Cafe because it was on Alderman Street, and the owner, a 50-something woman named Bev, had not wanted to be precious about naming it. The interior was warm without being cloying: exposed brick on one wall, mismatched wooden tables, a long window along the front that caught the morning light in a way that made the whole space look like it was happening inside a photograph. Bev made the coffee herself most mornings. The menu was short and the pastries were inconsistent but good, the kind of inconsistency that told you a real person was baking them. Grayson had his corner. Not literally his, no reserved sign, no formal claim, but the corner table near the window had been available for him every Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes Monday, for going on 8 months. And he'd come to rely on it the way you rely on things that haven't let you down. He'd sit there with his coffee and his laptop and work for 2 hours before heading to the office. And those 2 hours were, without exaggeration, some of the most bearable hours of his week. This particular Tuesday in October was no different. He got his coffee from Bev, who handed it to him without asking, which he appreciated, and settled into his corner and opened the site survey he'd been picking through for the past 3 days. The cafe was filling up around him. Morning rush, the particular density of people who needed coffee before they could function, the sound of espresso machines and murmured orders, and the scrape of chair legs on hardwood. He was deep in a load-bearing calculation when he heard the commotion. Not loud, not dramatic, the way crises are in movies. It was more like a sudden shift in the ambient noise, a gasp from somewhere close, the clatter of something falling, a woman's voice saying, "I've got it, I've got," in the taut, controlled tone of someone who very much did not have it. He looked up. She was maybe 6 feet from him, in the narrow aisle between his row of tables and the counter. She was in a wheelchair, a sleek manual chair, not bulky, the kind designed for someone who used it all the time. And the chair had gotten caught at a weird angle, one wheel snagged on the leg of a chair someone had pushed out from a neighboring table without looking. She was reaching for the counter with one hand, trying to correct, but the angle was wrong and the chair was already tipping, momentum doing what momentum does, and the woman at the counter was too far to reach her in time, and no one else in the crowded aisle had yet processed what was happening. Grayson was already moving. He didn't think about it. He was an engineer. He saw structural problems the way other people saw faces. And what was happening in front of him was a structural problem with a very clear solution and a very short window. He crossed the distance in 3 steps, got his arm around her before the chair went fully sideways, caught the chair's frame with his other hand, and took the weight of both the woman and the chair in a single absorbing moment that wasn't graceful but was effective. The chair righted. She was upright. His arm was still around her shoulders. For a moment, neither of them moved. She was gripping his forearm. He could feel the strength of it. Her fingers locked tight, the grip of someone whose arms were very strong from years of doing what arms do when legs cannot. She was breathing. He was breathing. The cafe around them had paused in that particular way crowds pause when they've just narrowly avoided witnessing something bad. Then she looked up at him. He registered this in fragments, the way you register things when your nervous system is still catching up, somewhere around his age. Dark eyes, sharp features, the kind that weren't conventionally beautiful, but were striking in the way that faces with real bone structure are striking. Her hair was dark and pulled back, but not neatly, the kind of not neat that comes from a morning that started early and moved fast. She was wearing a blazer over a gray shirt, and she was looking at him with an expression that he couldn't immediately read. Not gratitude, not embarrassment, something more complicated than either. "You can let go," she said. Her voice was even, controlled. "I'm okay." "Right." He released her, stepped back, realized his hand was still on the chair frame and removed it. "Sorry, I know." She reached down and adjusted the wheel, freeing it from where it had been caught. Her movements were efficient, practiced. She didn't look at the chair when she did it. She looked at him. The chair got snagged. It happens. The table leg was sticking out. "I noticed. It wasn't your fault. The angle—" "I know," she said again, less sharply this time. Something in her face shifted, some small reduction in the controlled flatness she'd been wearing. "I know. Thank you." He nodded. She looked at him for one moment longer than was strictly necessary. He looked back. Then someone at the counter called an order and the ambient noise of the cafe reasserted itself, and she turned back toward whatever she'd been doing before gravity had tried to get involved. Grayson returned to his corner table. He sat down, looked at his laptop. The load-bearing calculation was still there, patiently waiting. He stared at it for a while without actually seeing it. Her name, though he didn't know this yet, was Selena Cross. She was 30 years old. She was the CEO of Cross Analytics, a data technology company that her father had built from a consulting firm into a mid-size operation, and that she had, in the 7 years since taking the helm, rebuilt from the ground up into something worth approximately $4 billion. This was not a small thing. The financial press had opinions about it. Business magazines had featured her face on their covers, usually with headlines that managed, simultaneously, to acknowledge what she'd accomplished and to center her disability in a way that made her want to throw the magazines across whatever room she was in. She had been in the wheelchair for 4 years. The accident, a car accident on a winter road, the particular random violence of ice and bad timing, had damaged her lower spine in a way that the doctors had initially said might be temporary and had eventually said was not. She had spent 6 months learning to accept this, and had not, to be honest, fully succeeded. Acceptance was a word people used to describe a destination she suspected didn't actually exist. What she'd achieved was more like a working relationship with her body, an ongoing negotiation, not always comfortable but functional. It kept her upright. She kept it moving. They had an arrangement. She was in Ridgemont because her company had just acquired a small office building 3 blocks from Alderman Street, and she had come in early to walk, to move through the neighborhood before the acquisition paperwork was finalized. She did this sometimes, moved through places before committing to them, trying to get a sense of what they were before they became hers. It was a habit left over from her father, who had believed that you couldn't understand a building from blueprints alone. She'd stopped at the cafe because she needed coffee and because the place looked like it was run by someone who actually cared about coffee, which was not always true of cafes that presented themselves as caring about coffee. She had not planned to nearly fall out of her wheelchair in front of a stranger. She had not planned for the stranger to catch her without making a production of it. People who helped her, and people often tried to help her, whether she wanted it or not, almost always made a production of it. The particular performance of helpfulness, the wide eyes, the over-explained concern, the lingering look that said, "I want you to know that I see you as a full person, despite this chair," in a way that managed to do the exact opposite of what it intended. She had developed a precise and calibrated response to this performance that was polite but closed. The man in the corner, the one with the dark hair and the quiet way of moving, and the absolutely efficient, undemonstrative way he'd simply caught her and steadied her and then stepped back and apologized for the table leg, had not performed anything. He'd just helped. Then he'd gotten out of the way. She'd noticed that. She sat at the counter with her coffee and her laptop and did not look back at his corner table. She worked for 40 minutes. She finished her coffee. She packed up her things with the practiced economy of someone who'd learned to manage a bag and a chair simultaneously without assistance. At the door, she stopped. He was still there in his corner, working. He had his coffee at his elbow, and he was frowning at his screen with the particular frown of someone who was genuinely thinking and not performing thought. He hadn't looked at her again since the incident, not once. She'd been peripherally aware of this in the way that you notice the absence of something you're braced for. She turned and went out onto Alderman Street. The October air was cold and clear, and she sat for a moment on the sidewalk outside the cafe before starting toward her car. She was thinking about the man in the corner. She was thinking about his face when she'd looked up at him. Not alarmed, not pitying, just focused. The face of someone solving a problem, not performing a rescue. She didn't know why she was still thinking about it. 3 days later, she was back. She told herself it was because the coffee was good. This was true. It was also not the whole truth, but she'd gotten quite good at presenting partial truths to herself in the early morning and not examining them too closely until later. He was there. Same corner, same posture, same frown at the same laptop. She got her coffee from the woman at the counter. Bev, whose name she'd gathered from the way a regular had greeted her, and found a table near the window on the opposite side of the room. She worked. He worked. The cafe was busy. None of this was remarkable. The load calculation's different when you account for the cantilever, he said. She looked up. He was at her table. She hadn't heard him approach, which was unusual. She was good at tracking movement in a room, had trained herself to be. He'd set his empty coffee cup on the edge of her table, and he was looking at her laptop screen with a frown. I'm sorry? Your spreadsheet. He pointed, not at her, at the screen. The load model. Column C is pulling from a formula that doesn't account for the span ratio. You've got a cantilever in row 14, but it's using the same factor as the fixed support in row 3. She looked at her screen. She looked at column C. He was right. The model she'd been using to evaluate the structural report on the Ridgemont building. She'd pulled it from a template and hadn't caught that it was set up for a different building type. That's, she said, actually correct. Sorry, I wasn't trying to read your work. I was walking past and I caught the structure of the spreadsheet. He stepped back. Occupational thing. You're an engineer? Structural. I'm evaluating a building acquisition. The report was done by the seller's firm, and I've been running parallel calculations to verify. The cantilever thing would have given you a false read on the third floor capacity. I know. She was already correcting the formula. Thank you. He stood there for a moment with his empty cup. She finished the correction and looked up. I'm Grayson, he said. Selena. He nodded. You were in here Thursday. I was. I didn't stare, he said. Just so you know. I noticed you came in again and I made a point not to stare. She studied him. Why are you telling me that? Because most people stare. And then they feel guilty about it, and they try to compensate by being aggressively normal, which is its own kind of staring. He paused. I figured you'd noticed either way, so I might as well say it. Selena said nothing for a moment. The cafe moved around them, indifferent. Bev called out a name at the counter. You're right, Selena said. I did notice. Okay. He picked up his cup. I'll let you fix your spreadsheet. You can sit down, she said. She wasn't sure why she said it. She said it anyway. He looked at her. Then he looked at the chair across from her. Then he sat down. For the cantilever issue, she said, pulling up the full model. If I correct column C, I need to propagate the fix through to row 22. The shear calculation depends on it. Row 22. She found it. There. Yep. They looked at the corrected model together for a moment. The numbers behaved the way numbers were supposed to. Better, he said. Much better. She closed the spreadsheet. Do you work near here? My office is on Merchant Street. I walk through here on the way. I'm acquiring a building 3 blocks that way. She gestured with her chin. Hopefully. Good block, he said. Older buildings on that stretch, pre-war construction on most of them. Solid, usually, but the foundation work is where you want to look. The report flagged the foundation on the east side. Smart seller's firm, then. He turned his empty cup slowly in his hands. Or they flagged it before you could to control the conversation about it. She tilted her head. That's a cynical read. I've dealt with a lot of sellers. Fair point. He smiled. Not a big smile. Just a shift at the corner of his mouth, brief and genuine, the kind of smile that doesn't know it's doing anything. She noticed it because she'd spent a lot of years in rooms where smiles were calculated and deployed with purpose, and this one wasn't. I should get back, he said, standing. I've got a site visit at 10. Of course, he picked up his cup. The building on that block with the green awning, that's the one you're looking at. The one with the green awning, yes. The south wall has a crack running from the second floor window to the roof line. It's been there for at least 2 years. I've walked past it. Could be cosmetic, could be settling. Worth having someone look at it who isn't on the seller's payroll. He walked back to his corner, gathered his laptop and jacket, and left. Selena sat with her coffee for a while after he'd gone. She pulled up the structural report on the Ridgemont building and found the section on the south wall. The seller's firm had noted minor surface cracking, cosmetic in nature, recommend monitoring. She made a note to have her own engineer look at it. She came back the following Tuesday. He was there. He looked up when she came in, not with the kind of look that tracked her chair across the room, but the brief up and back of someone who'd noted the arrival of a person they'd spoken to before. She got her coffee. She sat at the table near the window. After 20 minutes, he picked up his cup and came over. "Foundation report come back?" he asked. "Yesterday. You were right about the east side." "Bad?" "Manageable. We negotiated the price down." He sat down across from her, which she noticed he'd done without asking this time. Not in a presumptuous way, in the way of someone who'd established once that sitting down was acceptable and was now operating on that precedent. "Did you get the building?" he asked. "We close next month." "Good." "My CFO wanted to walk away. I overruled him." He looked at her with mild curiosity. "Was that the right call?" "I think so. The bones are good. The issues are fixable. Walking away from good bones because of fixable problems is—" She stopped. "What?" "It's short-sighted." She turned her cup. "That's what my father used to say. Don't walk away from good bones." "Your father was in real estate?" "Business. He built a company. I run it now." She kept her voice even, factual. Not a deflection, she just didn't elaborate. He didn't push. "My dad was a carpenter," Grayson said, "which is half the reason I became an engineer, I think. Spent enough time watching him figure out what was wrong with things that I got interested in the theory behind it." "Is he still working?" "He retired to Arizona 4 years ago. He's taken up golf, which he's terrible at, and he's very invested in being terrible at it. Calls me every Sunday to report his scores." "Do you understand golf scores?" "Not really. I just listen." She looked at him. There was something in the way he'd said that, "I just listen," that had a different quality than the rest of the sentence. Like he'd arrived at something he'd had to learn. "That's a skill," she said. "Listening?" "Actually listening, not just waiting for your turn." He shrugged. "I have a 6-year-old. You learn fast or you miss everything." "You have a son?" "Miles." Something in his face changed when he said the name. Not dramatically, just a warmth that came in and settled, like a lamp turning on in a room that had been dim. "He's in 1st grade. He has opinions about toast." "Toast?" "The shape of it. He believes triangles taste different from rectangles." "Does he have a theory about why?" "Multiple. They change week to week." She found herself smiling. Not the managed smile she used in meetings, the real one, smaller and less certain. "I was like that as a kid. I had theories about everything. My mother used to say I should have been a scientist instead of a suit." "Are you a suit?" She glanced down at her blazer. "I'm wearing one." "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "I suppose it's not." They were quiet for a moment. The cafe noise filled the space between them, comfortable rather than pressured. "You don't talk about the company much," he said. "Not an accusation, an observation." "I talk about it constantly," she said. "In meetings, on calls, to the press twice a month, whether I like it or not." She turned her cup again. "Here, I don't have to." He nodded slowly. "Okay. You don't ask. I figure you'll say what you want to say." She looked at him more carefully. "Most people, when they find out I run a company, they either want something from me or they want to tell me what they think I should be doing differently." "That sounds exhausting." "You have no idea. I mean, some idea. I worked for a firm where the partners were like that. That's part of why I went out on my own. And now? Now I have 3 employees and more work than I can reasonably take on, and I'm behind on an invoice that I keep forgetting to send." He shrugged. "But I like what I do. That's not a small thing?" "No." He looked at her. "Is it true for you? Do you like it?" The question landed differently than she expected. Not because it was rude, it wasn't, but because nobody asked that. They asked about growth strategy and market position, and her plans for the next quarter and whether the company would go public, and what the disability community meant to her professionally, and nobody just asked if she liked it. "Some days," she said honestly. He nodded, like that was a reasonable answer, like it didn't require follow-up or reassurance, or the reframe that it was worth it. "Some days is pretty good," he said. It became a rhythm. Tuesday mornings, sometimes Thursday. They didn't plan it. That is, neither of them said, let's meet here on Tuesday, or made any arrangement that would require either of them to commit to what the mornings had become. They just kept arriving at the same time, at the same cafe, and finding that the other person was there. Grayson told her about Miles in increments, the gap where the tooth had come out in December, the argument they'd had about whether dinosaurs would have liked chicken nuggets, the week Miles had gone through a phase of only wanting to wear his Halloween costume to bed. He told these stories the way a person tells stories about someone they love, in a way that has gotten complicated by loss, with warmth that was slightly careful, slightly guarded at the edges, the warmth of someone who knows that love is not always protection. He didn't tell her about his wife, not right away, but she could hear the shape of the absence in the way he spoke about Miles, and the particular pronoun management of a single parent, always I, never we, never the reflexive we that couples use without thinking. She didn't ask. She let him arrive at it in his own time. One Thursday morning in November, he set his coffee down and said, without particular preamble, Miles's mom passed away. He was 2. Car accident. He said it in the way of someone who has said it many times and knows that no delivery makes it easier to receive. I'm sorry, she said. It's been 4 years. He turned his cup. I don't say that to minimize it. I say it because people usually want context, like there's a timeline on... He stopped. Sorry, you didn't ask for the analysis. Don't apologize. I'm not sure how to talk about it without over-explaining. I've never found the right version. There isn't one, she said quietly. She knew this about grief, not from personal experience of that particular kind, but from the years after her accident, from the loss of the person she'd been before the ice and the bad timing. There's just the version you land on in any given conversation. He looked at her. Yeah. Mine was a car accident too, she said. Different ending, obviously, but the road part. She gestured slightly toward her chair, not pointing at it, just acknowledging it. 4 years ago. He held her gaze. I didn't know. You didn't ask. I thought... He paused. I didn't want to ask. I know. She turned her cup. I appreciate that. Most people ask immediately and then feel like they've earned something by knowing. What do they think they've earned? Intimacy, I think. Or the right to be pitying without it seeming like pity. He was quiet for a moment. Does it bother you when people ask? It bothers me when they ask because they need to know. It doesn't bother me when someone asks because they actually care about the answer. She looked at him carefully, which is rarer than it sounds. Outside the window of the cafe, the November street moved past. A woman with a stroller. 2 kids on a corner waiting for a bus. The city in its morning business, indifferent and ongoing. Do you mind, she said, if I ask you something? Go ahead. Is it lonely, doing it alone? He looked at the table for a moment. The question was direct in the way she was direct when she was being real rather than managed. Yeah, he said. Some days it's very lonely. He looked up. Not in the big dramatic way. Not in the way that keeps you up at night. More like, he searched for it. Like there's an echo in the house, like you keep turning to say something to someone and the room just gives it back to you. She absorbed this, said nothing for a moment. Then, I know that echo. The work version. The all versions version. She held her cup with both hands. I have an office full of people who depend on me, and I go home to an apartment that is, she paused, very quiet. And you can't say that to anyone at work. Not without it becoming a headline. CEO admits loneliness, which everyone would read as company in trouble. People project a lot onto the person in charge. They project everything. She said it without bitterness, which was its own kind of achievement. If I'm tired, it's a crisis. If I'm confident, I'm arrogant. If I'm in a wheelchair, I'm either an inspiration or a liability, depending on who's in the room. Which do they usually land on? Depends on the quarter. Her mouth curved, dry and real. Good earnings, inspiration. Bad earnings, liability. He laughed. It was a short, genuine sound, surprised out of him. That's a brutal calculus. It's the job. Does it ever... He stopped. Say it. Does it ever make you want to just... He made a gesture, a kind of open-handed release. Disappear for a while. Not in a bad way. Just be no one. She was quiet long enough that he started to think he'd overstepped. I came to this cafe, she said finally, because it's not on a block where anyone from my world comes. I came back because the coffee was good, and the woman behind the counter doesn't know who I am, and no one has ever once tried to talk to me about market share. He held her gaze. And then you showed up, she said, knowing what a cantilever is, and not knowing or caring what cross-analytics is, and not staring, the faintest pause. And I kept coming back. The cafe around them went on doing what cafes do. Bev called an order. The door opened and let in a blade of November cold that closed again. Somewhere in the room, someone laughed at something. Grayson looked at the woman across from him, the woman who'd nearly fallen out of her chair and had grabbed him with the grip of someone who never let herself fall if she could possibly help it, who wore the weight of a $4 billion company, the way you wear something that fits you well enough, but still pulls at the shoulders, and felt something move in his chest that he recognized and didn't know what to do with. He'd been not knowing what to do with it for 3 weeks. I kept coming back too, he said. She looked at him. Her expression was not soft exactly. She didn't do soft in the way he'd seen people do it, the melting kind, the yielding kind. What her expression did was open slightly in a way that he understood cost her something, like a door that didn't open easily and she was choosing to open it anyway. I know, she said. Miles, on Friday afternoon, asked, Dad, who's Selena? Grayson was unloading the dishwasher. He stopped. What? You said her name, yesterday, when you were on the phone, and then this morning when you thought I was asleep. Miles was sitting on the kitchen counter where he was not supposed to sit, watching his father with the particular clear-eyed attention of children who miss almost nothing. You said, I think she... And then you stopped. Grayson set a cup in the cabinet. She's a friend. A friend, or a work friend. What's the difference? Miles considered this with the seriousness of someone who had given the taxonomy of friendship significant thought. A work friend you don't think about at home. A friend you do. Grayson looked at his son. Miles looked back, calm and patient, waiting. A friend, Grayson said. Miles absorbed this. Then, apparently satisfied, he slid off the counter, which he was not supposed to be on, and went back to whatever he'd been doing. Grayson stood in his kitchen with a coffee cup in his hand and thought about the woman in the cafe, about the echo in her apartment and the door that opened and the grip of someone who was very strong in the ways that people become strong when they've had to be, and he thought, careful. He thought, careful. He listened to his son moving around in the next room and thought about loss and about the size of the thing he'd built around himself after the loss, the functional structure of it, the 4 seconds every morning, the corner table, the life that held. He thought about good bones. He thought, some problems are worth the risk of the south wall. He put the cup in the cabinet and went to find his son. November moved through the city the way November does. Slowly, then all at once, the light going thin and early, the cold settling in like a tenant who'd decided to stay. Grayson noticed it on his walks to the cafe, the way the air had changed from the brisk October cold that felt temporary into something with more intention to it. The kind of cold that asked you to decide things. He'd been thinking about decisions a lot lately. The Tuesday after Miles had caught him saying Selena's name in the kitchen, Grayson arrived at the cafe 6 minutes later than usual. He'd had to go back twice for things Miles had forgotten, a library book, and a permission slip for something involving paper mache, and found Selena already at the corner table. His corner table. She was working, head down, and she'd put her coffee on the side of the table that faced the window, leaving the other side and the other chair open. He wasn't sure if that was deliberate. He chose to believe it wasn't, because the alternative meant thinking about it too carefully, and he'd been doing enough of that. You're late, she said without looking up. Permission slip crisis. Resolved? Temporarily. There will be another one by Thursday. He got his coffee from Bev, who had started having it ready when she saw him come through the door, a development he found both convenient and slightly alarming in terms of what it said about the predictability of his life. He sat down across from Selina. You're in my corner. Your corner? The corner I use. She looked up then. There was the faintest trace of amusement at the edge of her expression. I got here first. That's a very reasonable point. Thank you. I'm still going to sit here. I counted on that, she said, and looked back at her screen. He opened his laptop. They worked in parallel for a while. The particular comfortable silence of two people who've established that silence between them doesn't require management. Outside the window, Alderman Street was doing its morning thing. A delivery truck was parked badly across from a fire hydrant. Two women in matching winter coats were walking a very small dog with a very large opinion of itself. A man on a bicycle nearly clipped the truck's side mirror and said something emphatic about it. You're not working, Selina said. I'm thinking. About? Load paths. This was true. It was also not entirely what he was thinking about. There's a project I'm about to start, commercial renovation, old building on Clover Street, and the original load path goes through a wall the client wants to remove. I'm trying to figure out where to transfer the load. Can you go up? To the floor above? Use a beam to redirect the load laterally and transfer it to the exterior walls. Skip the interior entirely. He looked at her. That's a viable solution. I know. I didn't study structural engineering, but I've been acquiring buildings for 4 years. You learn the vocabulary. She took a sip of her coffee. The Ridgemont building had a similar issue. Previous owner removed a load-bearing wall without properly redistributing. The beam above it was flexing. How bad? A 1/4 inch of visible deflection. The inspector said it had probably been that way for 15 years and would probably be fine for another 15. Which is the kind of thing an inspector says when they want to be technically accurate while also not committing to anything. Exactly what I thought. She closed the spreadsheet she'd been in and opened something else. We fixed it before close, added it to the seller's remediation list. Good. She glanced at him. You look like you slept badly. He had in fact slept badly, but he hadn't realized it was visible. He ran a hand over his face, which did nothing useful. Miles had a nightmare around 2. He doesn't remember them when he wakes up. He's in this phase where he just kind of comes and stands in the doorway until I notice him. Doesn't say anything, doesn't call out, just appears. That sounds alarming. The first time it happened, I thought I was the one having the nightmare. He turned his cup. Now I just make room. He climbs in and he's asleep again in 4 minutes, and I'm awake for another hour listening to him breathe and thinking about everything I was supposed to have done that day. Selina was quiet for a moment, her hands still on her keyboard. Does he have the nightmares often? More in the fall and winter. I don't know if it's the dark or what. His therapist says it's probably anxiety, the seasonal light change, that kind of thing. We work on it. He shrugged. He's doing okay. Better than he was a year ago. Did he ever ask about his mother? The question landed gently. She'd waited to ask it. He could tell she'd been holding it for a few conversations, building up to whether it was okay. He appreciated the patience of it. He asked sometimes, Grayson said. Not as often as he used to. When he was 4, he went through a period where he asked every single day. The same questions, mostly. What did she look like? Did she like music? Was she funny? I answered every time. He paused. My mother-in-law gave him a photo album for his 5th birthday. Just pictures of Kara, his mom, at different ages. He looks at it sometimes. He doesn't always tell me when he does. That's a kind thing his grandmother did. She's a kind woman. It was hard on her losing Kara, but she's never made it about herself around Miles, He stopped. It's not a given that people handle grief without making it a burden on others. She does. Selina nodded slowly. There was something moving behind her eyes that she wasn't saying, and he let her not say it. Your parents, he said after a moment. Are they... My mother lives in Vancouver. We talk on Sundays. My father passed away 3 years ago, about a year after my accident. She said it the way she said hard things, directly, without armor, but also without invitation for excessive response. He was sick for a while before. The accident and what came after was... I think it was hard for him to see. He didn't do well with things he couldn't fix. I'm sorry. We made our peace before he died. That matters. She looked at her screen, then back at him. I took over the company because he built it, and I was the best person to run it. But also because I think I needed something to hold on to that was his, something I could keep going. She paused. That probably it sounds completely understandable. It sounds like I'm running a $4 billion company partly out of grief. Aren't most things built partly out of grief? Or loss? Or something you're trying to hold on to? She looked at him for a moment. The cafe moved around them. You built something too. This life you have with Miles. The apartment, the school, the walking route to this cafe. I did. Out of the same thing. Yeah. He held her gaze. But I think I also built it a little bit out of fear. That's the part I'm less proud of. Fear of what? He looked at his coffee cup. Of what happens if I want something and I don't get it again. The word again sat between them, small and specific and heavy. Selena didn't say anything immediately. She had a way of receiving hard admissions, not rushing to fill them with reassurance, not deflecting, just holding them for a moment in the space between people like they deserved to be held. That's not fear, she said finally. That's just being human after something hard. Is there a difference? I think so. Fear is what you do with it, whether you let it make decisions for you. He looked at her. The woman who'd grabbed his forearm with both hands and looked up at him with that complicated expression that wasn't gratitude and wasn't embarrassment, who came to a cafe in a neighborhood where no one from her world came, who kept coming back. Are you letting it, he asked, make decisions for you? She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Some of them, she said. Yes. Me too. I know. So we're two people sitting in a cafe making fear-based decisions. And fixing spreadsheets, she said, and talking about load paths. Important work. Critically important. The corner of her mouth moved. Someone has to do it. He laughed, that short, genuine sound again, and something in the air between them shifted in the way things shift when two people have said something true and both know it, and neither one knows yet what to do with it. Bev came by to refresh the coffee, looked at neither of them in a way that suggested she was very deliberately looking at neither of them, and moved on. Tell me something, Grayson said. What? Something that isn't about work or the building or... He gestured loosely. The parts of your life you'd put in a professional bio. She raised an eyebrow. That's a broad category of exclusion. I know. She sat back slightly, and he watched her think about it, not performing thought, actually searching. He liked that about her. The thinking was visible. In a world full of people who hid their process, she let her show. I used to paint, she said. Watercolor, badly. I was never good at it, but I liked it. My therapist after the accident suggested I take it up again, and I didn't, because I told myself I didn't have time, and that was mostly true and also mostly an excuse because I think I was afraid the things I painted would come out different than before, and I didn't want evidence of that. Evidence of having changed, of not being who I was. She looked at her hands, which is irrational. Obviously I changed. The chair is a fairly significant indicator of change. The chair's not you. I know that, logically. She looked up. Emotionally, I was 34% sure of it for the first 2 years, and I've worked my way up to about 70. 70 is pretty good. Most days. She turned her cup in her hands. The same habit as his, he'd noticed. The same restless rotation. What about you? Before Miles, before the work? What did you... I played guitar, he said. Not well. I had 3 chords and enormous confidence in those 3 chords. He paused. I haven't touched it in, I don't know, 3 years maybe? It's in the hall closet behind Miles's old stroller. Behind the stroller, deeply committed to being inaccessible. Have you thought about getting it out? Sometimes. He looked at the table. Miles asked about it once. He found a picture of me playing it at a party back when I was in grad school. He asked if I still played, and I said I used to. He asked why I stopped. He stopped. What did you tell him? I told him I got busy. He said it flatly, with the mild self-disgust of someone who'd heard their own excuse and not loved it.
which is the adult version of I got scared and I needed the closet to keep it somewhere I didn't have to think about it. We are a pair of people hiding things in closets, she said, metaphorically, and apparently also literally. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and they were both almost smiling, which was a kind of closeness all by itself.
They stayed another 40 minutes past when they usually left. Neither of them mentioned this. When they finally gathered their things, his laptop, her bag that she managed with the efficient one-handed economy that he'd stopped noticing as anything unusual, they were quiet in the easy way of people for whom silence has stopped being something to fill. At the door, she stopped. He held it, not in the performative way people sometimes held doors, the wide swing with the meaningful look, but the ordinary way, because she was closest to the door when they reached it. "The guitar," she said. "You should think about taking it out of the closet." "The watercolors," he said. "Same." She looked at him for a moment in the November doorway with the cold coming in around them. "Okay," she said. Then she was out on the street, and he watched her navigate the slight drop of the cafe threshold, which she did with the practiced, slightly effortful movement that he'd learned meant the drop was bigger than it looked. And then she was on the sidewalk and moving, and he stood in the doorway for a beat longer than was necessary before he let the door swing shut behind him. On the walk back to his office, he thought about what she'd said. Fear is what you do with it, whether you let it make decisions for you. He turned it over the way you turn over a thing that has weight to it, checking for where the weight lives. He thought about Kara, about the particular geography of that grief. The first year, when everything was just surviving. The second year, when surviving started to feel like not enough. The third year, when he'd caught himself exactly once, looking at someone across a room at a party and feeling something, and had gone home and sat in the dark kitchen for an hour before he'd understood what had frightened him. Not the feeling, the possibility of losing again. 4 years was a long time to let that possibility make decisions. He got to his office, said hello to his assistant, who handed him 3 things he needed to sign, sat down at his desk, and instead of opening the Clover Street file, he looked at the middle distance for a while. Then he opened the file. He had a job to do. Miles, that evening, produced from his backpack a drawing he'd made at school. It was done in crayon with the specific commitment to color that first graders bring to crayon work, which is to say several colors had been used in quantities that exceeded any realistic requirement. It appeared to be 2 people sitting across from each other at a table. "Who's this?" Grayson asked. "You," Miles said, pointing to the larger figure. He pointed to the other one. "And your friend." Grayson looked at the drawing. The figure that was apparently Selena was in a chair that had, he looked more closely, wheels on it. Small crayon wheels, carefully drawn. "You put wheels on her chair," he said. Miles shrugged, the full-body shrug of a 6-year-old for whom this was not complicated. "You said she has a wheelchair. Chairs have wheels. I wanted to get it right." Grayson looked at his son. Miles was already moving toward the kitchen, the art project apparently concluded, and his attention relocated to the matter of what was for dinner. "Hey," Grayson said. Miles turned. "This is good," Grayson said, holding up the drawing. "Really good." Miles assessed this with the evaluative calm of someone who had received professional-grade compliments before, and was willing to accept them without becoming insufferable. "I know," he said. "I worked on the wheels for a long time." Then he disappeared into the kitchen. Grayson set the drawing on the coffee table. The 2 crayon figures sat across from each other at their table, the wheels carefully rendered, the colors aggressively applied, nothing about it technically accurate, and everything about it correct. He looked at it for a while. Then he went to the hall closet. He moved the stroller to one side. The guitar was behind it in its case, which was dusty and latched with one broken clasp he'd never fixed. He pulled it out and set it on the couch and sat next to it and looked at it for a long time before he opened the case. It was a 6-string acoustic, nothing special. He'd bought it in grad school from a guy who was moving and needed to sell it fast. The finish was worn at the edges, and one of the tuning pegs was slightly sticky, and it had a small crack near the nut that had always been cosmetic, never structural. He ran his hand along the neck. The strings were dead, too long unplayed. They'd need replacing, but he pressed his fingers into position for a G chord anyway, and strummed. The sound that came out was dull and slightly wrong, flat, dead strings, out of tune. He strummed it again anyway. From the kitchen, Miles's voice. "Is that a guitar?" "Yeah." A pause. Then the sound of small feet. Miles appeared in the doorway, assessing. "It sounds bad," Miles said. "The strings are dead. They need replacing." "Is it yours?" "It's mine." Miles came and stood next to him and looked at the guitar with the serious evaluation he brought to things he found genuinely interesting.
"Are you going to play it?" "I don't know yet. Connor's sister plays guitar. She knows a whole song." "Yeah?" "It's about a horse, I think. Or a house." Connor wasn't sure. Grayson smiled. "I'll replace the strings and see what happens." Miles nodded, satisfied with this answer. He leaned against his father's arm in the unself-conscious way he still had, the way Grayson knew would eventually become less frequent as he got older and started to feel self-conscious about that kind of contact. He was storing it up without meaning to, the weight of his son against his shoulder. "Dad?" "Yeah? Is your friend coming here sometime?" Grayson turned the guitar in his hands. "Maybe sometime." "Okay." Miles yawned enormously. "She can see the guitar when it sounds better." "That's a good plan." Miles pushed off from his arm and went back toward the kitchen and the ongoing question of dinner. And Grayson sat on the couch with the dead-stringed guitar and the crayon drawing on the coffee table and the November dark coming in through the windows. He thought, maybe sometime. He thought, careful. Then he went to make dinner and didn't pick up his phone to text her and made dinner and got Miles through his bath and his reading and his negotiations about what constituted an acceptable bedtime, and lay awake afterward for an hour in the dark doing exactly what he'd told Selena he did, listening to the echo in the house, to the ambient silence of a life built carefully and alone. But when he finally slept, he slept without the 4-second pause he usually needed. He was out before he'd finished the thought he'd started. He didn't notice this until the morning. Selena, meanwhile, was in her apartment on the 22nd floor of a building downtown, sitting at her desk at 11:30 at night with a third of a glass of wine she'd been working on for 2 hours and a budget projection she should have sent back to finance already. The projection was fine. She'd read it 3 times. She kept not sending it back. She was thinking about the watercolors. She had a set, a good one, bought years ago and moved from apartment to apartment in a flat case that lived in the bottom of her studio closet. She hadn't opened it in years. She'd opened the closet plenty of times, had seen the case, and had managed not to see it in the way you manage not to see things you've agreed with yourself not to deal with. She pulled up her laptop and opened a new tab, and without deciding to, typed watercolor paper into a search bar. Then she sat looking at the results for a while without clicking anything. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Her COO, sending a late message about something that could wait until morning but that he'd sent at 11:30 anyway because he was the kind of person who treated 11:30 as a reasonable hour for business communication. She looked at the message. She did not respond. She thought about Grayson in his corner, which was now their corner in some sense that neither of them had made official, saying, "I built it out of fear." That's the part I'm less proud of. She thought about how it had felt when he'd said that. Not like a weakness, like an honesty. The specific relief of hearing someone else admit the shape of a thing she recognized. She closed the budget tab. She sent a note to finance. Projection approved, minor comment on Q4 timeline, will call in the morning. She finished the wine. She didn't open the closet, but she thought about the watercolor case in the bottom of it, and she thought, tomorrow. It wasn't a promise. It was just a thought that had a different quality than the thoughts she usually let herself have at 11:30 at night. She turned off the desk light and went to bed and didn't sleep for a while, but lay in the quiet of the 22nd floor, listening to the city doing what cities do in the middle of the night, which is never actually silent, just changed. She thought, I kept coming back, and so did he. Outside, November moved through the city. In an apartment in Ridgemont, a 6-year-old slept with one arm off the bed. In a building downtown, a woman lay in the dark, letting herself want something. And somewhere between them, the thing that was growing between 2 people who had both been careful for a very long time continued growing, the way things do when no one is watching. The guitar strings arrived on a Wednesday, ordered online, and shipped in a slim cardboard envelope that Miles examined with great interest before determining it was not for him and losing interest entirely.
Grayson restrung the guitar that night after Miles was in bed, sitting on the couch with a string winder and a tuner app on his phone, working slowly because he'd half forgotten the process and had to look up the bridge pin sequence twice. It took him 40 minutes to do something that used to take 10. When he was done, he tuned it and played a G chord, and this time the sound that came out was clean and full and resonant in the apartment's quiet. He sat with it for a while, played the G, moved to a C. The third chord, the D. His fingers found without thinking, muscle memory outlasting years of neglect. 3 chords, the same 3 he'd had at 24 with his enormous and unjustified confidence. He played them in sequence, slowly, without any particular song in mind. Just the chords, the sound of them in the room, the vibration of the wood against his chest. He didn't text Selena about it. He'd thought about it and decided not to, the same way he'd decided not to on several other occasions over the past weeks. Not because he didn't want to, because the wanting was exactly what made him careful. What he did instead was tell her Thursday morning at the cafe, setting his coffee down and saying, before he'd even sat, "I restrung the guitar." She looked up. "And? Sounds the way it's supposed to. Did you play anything?" 3 chords. The same 3? The same 3, with, I think, approximately the same confidence as before. The corner of her mouth moved. "Progress." "Incremental," he agreed and sat down. She looked good. He noticed this without letting himself dwell on it. The noticing had become a habit, the not dwelling a discipline. She was wearing a dark green sweater instead of the blazer she usually wore, which meant she'd come straight from wherever she stayed when she was in this part of the city rather than from downtown. He'd learned that she kept a smaller apartment in Ridgemont now, closer to the building she'd acquired. A practical decision, she'd said, about commute times. He'd believed her. He'd also believed that 2 apartments in the same city was the kind of decision a person made when they had more than one reason for being in a place. "The watercolors?" he asked. She looked at her coffee. "I opened the case. That's something. I looked at them for a while and then I closed the case. Also something. A smaller something. Still." He tilted his head. "Did it feel bad, looking at them?" She thought about it, genuinely thought, not the social pause that precedes a prepared answer. "No," she said. "That's the thing. I was braced for it to feel bad, and it just didn't. They were just brushes and paint. They looked exactly like what they are." "Maybe that's the answer. Maybe." She turned her cup. "Or maybe I've just sufficiently compartmentalized that I can look at things from my previous life without feeling them." She said this without self-pity, more in the tone of someone presenting a hypothesis they're not sure they believe. "My therapist would have something to say about that." What would she say? That the absence of pain isn't the same as healing, that sometimes we go numb in pieces without noticing. She shrugged one shoulder. "She's usually right, which is the annoying thing about her. You like her. I respect her, which is better, actually. I don't need to like the people who are right about me." He laughed. She watched him laugh with the expression she sometimes had when he did. Not quite smiling herself, just receiving it, like it was something she was storing. "My therapist," he said, "told me about 18 months ago that I was building a life around the absence of risk, that I'd made Miles's stability into a justification for never doing anything that scared me." He paused. "I told him he was wrong. He agreed to disagree." "Were you wrong?" "Definitely." He looked at the table. "But I wasn't ready to not be wrong yet." "And now?" He met her eyes. "Working on it." She held his gaze for a moment and then looked away first, which she didn't usually do. He noticed that too. They worked for a while in the comfortable parallel that had become the structure of their mornings. Around 10, she took a call. Short, clipped, the voice she used for work that was different from the voice she used here, more compressed, more deliberate. When she hung up, she put the phone face down on the table with a particular firmness that meant the call had not been pleasant. "Everything okay?" "Board meeting next week. There's a member who has opinions about the company's direction that differ substantially from mine." She said this in the measured way she said things she was actually angry about. "He's been gathering allies." "How many?" "Enough to be a nuisance. Not enough to do anything yet. What does he want? To take the company in a direction that would be very profitable for the next 3 years and very damaging after that. He looks at a 4-year forecast and sees the first 2. She pressed 2 fingers against the edge of her phone. He's also been in that boardroom longer than I have, which he uses as a form of argument. Seniority as a substitute for being right. Exactly. And it's not that he's stupid, he's not. He's just optimizing for a different timeline than I am. Her jaw was slightly set. I've been building this company to last. He's been on enough boards to know how to gut one efficiently and walk away clean. Grayson watched her. There was something different about her when she talked about the company. Not colder exactly, but more contained. All the edges came in. He understood it. She was protecting something she'd built, using every controlled surface she had. You'll handle it, he said. She looked at him. You don't know that. No. He held her gaze. But I've watched you rewrite a cantilever calculation in real time, negotiate a foundation repair into a price reduction, and hold a conversation about corporate board politics without once raising your voice. I have reasonable confidence. Something moved in her expression, brief and unguarded. Then she put it back where it had been. You're kind. I'm accurate. Sometimes they're the same thing. She picked up her phone, turned it over, checked something, set it back down. I should go. I have a pre-meeting call at 11. Go. She gathered her things. At the edge of his peripheral vision, he could see her working the bag into position on the back of her chair with the efficiency of long practice. Not graceful, just worked out, a system. She'd told him once that the first year in the chair she'd dropped things constantly, that the geometry of reaching and balancing from a seated position was its own education, that there were about 6 months where she'd broken more dishes than she cared to count. She'd said it matter-of-factly, the way you report a chapter of your life that was hard but is now over. At the door she paused, a habit by now. Grayson. He looked up. The board member. His name is Warren Holt. She said it with precision, not casual. I'm telling you because, I don't know, I don't tell people things like this usually. The actual names, the actual specifics. A beat. I'm not sure what that means. He looked at her. It means you trust me. She considered this like she was checking it against something internal. Yes, she said. I suppose it does. And then she was out the door and he watched her through the window as she moved down Alderman Street. And he held his coffee in both hands and sat with the fact that Selena Cross had just told him she trusted him, which shouldn't have felt as significant as it did. It felt very significant. He was still sitting with it 10 minutes later when his phone buzzed. His business partner, Theo, sending 3 messages in rapid succession about the Clover Street project. He answered them and opened his laptop and went to work. And the morning continued the way mornings do, regardless of what happens in them. The following Tuesday was when everything changed. It didn't announce itself. That was the thing about the moments that rearrange things. They arrived inside ordinary days, wearing the clothes of ordinary circumstances, and you didn't know what they'd been until after. He'd had a site visit run long that morning. He got to the cafe at 10:45, nearly 2 hours later than usual, and texted her on the way. Running late, Clover Street ran over, but she didn't respond, which meant she was probably in a meeting or done for the morning and gone. He told himself it was fine. He'd get his coffee and do an hour of work, and that was fine. Bev handed him his coffee and he paid and turned toward the corner table and stopped. There was a man at his corner. This happened sometimes. No formal claim. He'd always accepted this. But this particular man was sitting across from an empty wheelchair and looking at his phone. And the wheelchair was Selena's chair, which Grayson recognized the way you recognize things that have become quietly familiar, which meant she was here somewhere. He found her at the counter, standing, which she could do briefly for short periods with effort. She'd explained this once when he'd asked about it, that the injury was incomplete, that she had some function in her legs, but not reliable function, not the kind she could count on, reaching for something on the shelf above the counter that Bev was helping her with. She had one hand on the counter edge for balance. The man at the corner table was watching her too. Grayson placed him in that moment. 40, clean-cut, expensive overcoat. He had his phone up. He was taking pictures. It took Grayson a full 3 seconds to process this. Then he walked over. "Excuse me," he said. Not loud, but with a particular quality that Theo had once called Grayson's load-bearing voice, the one that made people listen. The man looked up. "Sorry? You're taking pictures of someone without their knowledge." The man glanced at his phone, at Selena across the room, back at Grayson. Something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, recalculation. "I'm a journalist. This is a public space." "She's a private individual in a private moment. She's Selena Cross." He said it like that resolved something. CEO of Cross Analytics. She's been photographed hundreds of times. Grayson looked at him, put the phone down. "I'm not breaking any laws." "I didn't say you were breaking a law. I said put the phone down." They held the moment. The man looked at Grayson's face and apparently found something there that made the calculation come out differently, because he lowered the phone. Not with grace, but he lowered it. Grayson walked back to the counter. Selena had returned to her chair by then, the brief standing over, the chair resumed, and she was watching him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before. Alert, slightly guarded, like a door closing that had been open. "There's a journalist at the corner table," he said, keeping his voice low. "I saw." Her voice was even, controlled in the total way, the boardroom way. "He's from the Tribune, one of their business reporters." "Did you know he was here?" "No." She was already moving her bag, reorganizing, preparing to leave. "He must have followed. Someone on my staff must have mentioned the neighborhood. I have an office at the Ridgemont building now. It's not a secret location." "He was taking pictures of you." "I know." "Selena, it's not the first time." She said it quickly, not unkindly, but with a firmness that meant, "I have handled this before. Do not treat it like a crisis." "It's part of the work. My life has a public dimension, and I manage it." She looked at him. "It's fine." It didn't look fine. Her face looked fine. Impeccable, in fact. But her hands were slightly tighter on the wheels than they usually were. And she wasn't looking at the journalist, was deliberately not looking at him, which Grayson understood meant she was very aware of exactly where he was. "We've been meeting here for 6 weeks, she said. Her voice had gone slightly formal. Not cold, but professional. The board meeting voice. "If someone has been tracking my location, they might have pictures of both of us." "Yes." He absorbed this. "Does that matter? To the company?" She looked at him squarely. "To my professional life, no. A CEO can have coffee with a friend. To my private life..." She stopped. "It matters to me. I don't..." She pressed her lips together briefly. "I don't like being photographed without knowing. I don't like my movements being documented. After the accident, there was a period where the press was very interested in me for the wrong reasons, and I spent a year having that experience. I don't want it again." "I understand. And I don't want anyone in my life to be caught in that without choosing it." He held her gaze. "Meaning me." "Meaning you." She looked at the table for a moment. "You have Miles to think about. Your life here it's private. The way you've built it. I know that matters to you." There was something in the way she said it, not accusing, but clearly. She was giving him information, giving him room to respond to it however he needed to. The journalist was still at the corner table, phone apparently put away but still present, still watching, in the way of someone who has gotten what they came for and is now just being careful about leaving. "I'll walk out with you," Grayson said. "You don't have to..." "Selena." He looked at her. "I'll walk out with you." She looked back at him for a moment, then she nodded once. They left together through the front door, him holding it the ordinary way, her through the threshold with the slight concentrated effort the drop required. And outside on Alderman Street, the November air hit them both, and neither of them said anything for a moment. "I'm parked on the next block," she said. "Okay." They moved together along the sidewalk. He set his pace the way he'd learned without being instructed to, not slowing in the conspicuous way that people sometimes did, which always made her adjust to match them, which she didn't like. Just moving at the pace that worked for both. It had taken about 3 weeks to get there without thinking about it. At the corner, she stopped. He stopped. "I don't want this to be something that changes things," she said. Between us, the cafe, the mornings. She paused. I know that might not be up to either of us if he publishes something. What would he publish? Probably nothing yet. He's a business reporter. He was probably doing a routine location check confirming where I spend time. If they put something out about cross analytics in the next week, the picture will make sense. She looked at the traffic on the cross street. If they speculate about something else, then we deal with it. You deal with it too. I know. She looked at him. I'm not good at this part, she said. The part where I'm in someone else's life and my life has consequences for them. She stopped, started again. I've kept my world separate from people for a while. Because of this. Because my world has weight and I can't always control where it lands. He looked at her in the November street. A cab went by. Someone's delivery alert chimed. The city doing its indifferent business. I know what it is to protect someone, he said. What you do when the thing you care most about could get hurt. He paused. I also know what it is to mistake protection for distance. She looked at him for a long time. Don't make this easier than it is. I'm not. She stopped. You're looking at me like it's simple. It's not simple. He held her gaze. It's just not impossible. Neither of them said anything for a moment. I'll call my communications director this afternoon, she said finally. The practical voice engaging, the one she used to move through difficult things. She'll flag anything that goes through the Tribune about me. If they're going to run something, we'll know before it's out. Good. And She paused. I might stay away from the cafe for a few days. Until we know. He felt this land in his chest in a way he hadn't expected. Not dramatically, just the quiet impact of a thing being taken away before you'd fully admitted how much you'd come to need it. Okay, he said. It's just a few days. I know. She looked at him. For a moment her face was neither the boardroom face nor the careful cafe face. It was just her, slightly uncertain, slightly tired around the edges, in the way of someone who has been holding something difficult together for a long time. I'm sorry, she said, that this has a complicated side. Everything real has a complicated side. She absorbed this. Then she turned toward her car, and he stood on the corner and watched her go. The November light going thin above the city, his coffee growing cold in his hand, the cafe behind him where the journalist was probably still sitting, and the empty sidewalk ahead. He didn't go back to the cafe. He walked back to his office the long way, through streets he didn't usually take, and spent the walk not thinking about the journalist and thinking about him constantly. By the time he got to Merchant Street, he had his phone out and was searching. Not sure what he expected. Just searching. Selena Cross. Cross Analytics. The results came back in less than a second. There was a lot of them. He stood on the sidewalk outside his office building and read. He'd known she ran a company. He'd known it was significant. What he hadn't done, had deliberately not done, he realized now, because knowing felt like it would change something, was look at the scale of it. The Forbes profile from 18 months ago. The Fortune feature the year before that. The pieces about her taking over after her father. The turnaround of Cross Analytics from a firm bleeding clients into something that had reshaped its entire sector. The photographs. Conference stages, shareholder meetings, magazine covers. She looked different in them. Same face, same bone structure, same sharp intelligence in the dark eyes. But the way she held herself in those pictures was different from the way she held herself across a cafe table from him. In the photos, she was armored, fully assembled, every surface intentional. She was performing competence, and she was exceptional at performing it, and she clearly had to do it constantly. He thought about the woman who had told him she came to Alderman Street because nobody there knew who she was. He thought about that in a new way now, with the numbers in front of him. $4 billion, 230 employees, a board that wanted to take the company somewhere she wouldn't let it go. The weight of that. The actual weight. He put his phone in his pocket and went inside. He worked through the afternoon with the mechanical efficiency of someone whose hands know their job well enough that the mind can be somewhere else. Theo came by twice with questions about Clover Street. Grayson answered them correctly. He signed an invoice. He emailed a client. He did the work. At 4:15, his phone buzzed. Her number. He picked up. Hey, the Tribune is running a piece tomorrow. Her voice was the communications director voice, the managed one. About the Ridgemont acquisition, my communications director got a preview from their editor. It's a business piece. The acquisition, the neighborhood expansion strategy, what it means for Cross Analytics' real estate footprint. And? A brief pause. There's a photograph. It's from the cafe. It's the two of us sitting across from each other at the window table. You can see both our faces clearly. He sat back in his chair. What does the caption say? Nothing yet. They're deciding whether to include it. My director is negotiating for them to use a different image. Another pause, shorter. She says the photograph will probably be cut. It's a business piece, not a profile. And the acquisition is the story, but it exists. Yes. He sat with this. In his office, with the late afternoon light going orange through the window and his laptop open to a half-written structural report and the phone against his ear. Grayson. Her voice had shifted. Less managed, something underneath. If it runs, then it runs. People will... I know what people will do. Your son. She said it carefully. The attention. If it reaches Selena. He said her name the way he said it sometimes when she was moving too fast through a concern, processing it into abstraction. Take a breath. A beat of silence. I am breathing, she said, slightly drier. Are you? Technically. A brief pause. I'm better at managing these situations than I am at being in them. I noticed. She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her, the faint ambient sound of wherever she was. Her office, he thought, by the quality of the silence. The downtown apartment. I've been thinking, she said, about what I said on the street, that I've kept my world separate. Yeah. It wasn't only to protect other people. The honesty in it was quiet and flat, like a fact being stated rather than a confession being made. It was to protect myself from having someone in my life who could see what it costs. This job, the chair, the whole... She paused. All of it. And if I see it? The question landed between them. He heard her breathe. Then I can't pretend it doesn't affect me, she said finally. And I've been very good at pretending. He looked at the orange light on his office wall, at the Clover Street plans spread across his desk, the neat geometry of load paths and support structures, the engineering of things that hold. The photograph, he said. Whatever they decide, it's okay. You don't know that. I keep saying that, and you keep saying that back to me. Because it's true. It might be. He turned his chair slightly. But I also think I've spent 4 years deciding things were not okay before they happened, and then arranging my life accordingly. I'm trying not to do that this time. Silence on the line. Not an empty silence. The kind with weight, where the other person is sitting with something. This time, she repeated quietly. Yeah. Another beat, then, the photo will probably be cut. Probably. But if it's not, then we deal with it, he said. The same thing I said on the street. She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was slightly different. Not softer exactly, but with less of the managing in it. I'll let you know what they decide. Okay. Grayson. Yeah. Thank you, she said. For the street. Earlier. A pause. For telling him to put the phone down. He put it down. He did. Something in her voice that was almost the cafe voice. Good night. Good night. He sat with the phone in his hand after she'd hung up. The light outside had gone from orange to the gray-purple of a November evening settling in, and somewhere across the city, his son was at after-school care waiting to be picked up, and somewhere in a downtown apartment or a Ridgemont office, a woman was managing a thing she didn't want to need managing, and somewhere a journalist was deciding whether to use a photograph of two people at a cafe window. He got up, put on his jacket, went to get Miles. In the car, Miles said, "You're quieter than normal." Thinking about work stuff. The building with the crack in the wall? Different stuff. Miles considered this. Is it the friend stuff? Grayson looked at his son in the rear view. Miles was looking out the window, not at him, which was the way he sometimes asked things he suspected might be complicated. "A little bit," Grayson said. "Okay," Miles said, and said nothing else, which was one of the things about his son that he both loved and found, at moments, slightly uncanny. The kid knew when to leave room. They drove home through the November dark. The photograph might be cut. The photograph might not be cut. Grayson didn't know which he wanted more. For it to disappear, and with it, the exposure, the risk, the complicated weight of Selena Cross's world landing in his. Or for it to run, and with it the decision made, the thing named, the fear forced into a shape he could actually deal with. He parked. He and Miles went inside. He made dinner. He was at the stove when his phone buzzed. Her name on the screen. He picked it up. "They're cutting the photo." A pause, then, "It's fine. Everything's fine." He looked at the message for a moment. He thought about what fine meant and what it didn't mean, and what was still there, regardless of whether a photograph appeared in a newspaper tomorrow morning. He typed back, "Good. Get some sleep." Then after a moment he added, "I'll be at the cafe Thursday." He set the phone down and went back to the stove. Miles appeared in the doorway, nose working. "Is that pasta?" "It is." "Is it the good kind?" "It's the only kind I make." "That's the good kind," Miles confirmed, and came in to set the table. 3 seconds passed before Grayson's phone lit up on the counter. He didn't pick it up until the water was boiling. When he did, he read her message and stood still for a moment in his kitchen with the steam rising and his son arranging forks with characteristic 6-year-old inexactness. She'd written, "I'll be there." 2 words. He read them twice. Then he put the phone face down on the counter and went back to making dinner. And the November night settled over the city, and nothing had been resolved, and everything had shifted, quietly and without announcement, in the way that things shift when they've been moving in one direction long enough that only the distance reveals it. She was there Thursday. Same corner, same coffee, the green sweater again rather than the blazer. He noticed she'd been wearing it more often lately, the sweaters instead of the work armor, and he'd come to understand this as a signal, the way you learn to read signals in people you've spent enough time around. The blazer meant she was managing something. The sweater meant she'd put the managing down for a while. He got his coffee and sat across from her, and neither of them mentioned the photograph or the Tribune or the journalist at the corner table. They talked about Miles's papier-mâché project, which had turned out to be a volcano and had required 3 rounds of newspaper strips and a quantity of red paint that Grayson felt was excessive, but that Miles considered non-negotiable. They talked about the Clover Street project, where the beam solution Selena had suggested weeks ago was turning out to be exactly right. They sat in their corner while December edged in through the cafe windows and the morning did what mornings did around them. It was the most normal Thursday they'd had, and Grayson understood, in the way you understand things that you're not ready to say out loud, that the normalcy was itself a kind of answer to the week before, that they were both choosing it. Deliberately, without discussion, they were choosing ordinary. Walking back to his office that morning, he thought, this is what it looks like when 2 people decide not to run. He was wrong. He was right about them choosing ordinary, and wrong about the running being over. Because 2 days later, on a Saturday morning that had no business being anything other than a regular Saturday morning, Theo sent him a link with a message that said, only, "Heads up, man." He was in the kitchen making Miles's breakfast. He clicked the link. It was a gossip column, not the Tribune. Something smaller, more aggressive, the kind of outlet that existed to turn other outlets' discarded photographs into stories. The Tribune might have cut the picture, but someone at the Tribune, or someone adjacent to someone at the Tribune, had not been as careful with it as they should have been. The photograph was there, clear, unambiguous. He and Selena at the cafe window, leaning slightly toward each other across the table, the particular angle of 2 people in a conversation that matters. The caption read, Cross Analytics CEO, Selena Krott, mystery companion in Ridgemont Cafe. Who is he? He set his phone face down on the counter. Miles said, "Dad, the eggs sags." He turned back to the stove. The eggs were fine. He plated them. He cut the toast diagonally. He put Miles's breakfast in front of him and went and stood at the kitchen window with his own coffee and looked out at the December street. Who is he? He thought about Miles walking into school on Monday morning.
about whether anyone Miles knew would see this, which was irrational. Miles was 6. The parents of 6-year-olds were not reading gossip columns about tech executives. But the irrationality didn't make the image stop. He thought about what happened when these things picked up speed. He'd seen it happen to peripheral people, friends of friends who'd ended up in someone's orbit and found their private lives turned into content. He thought about his name, and Miles's name, and the school on Franklin Street where Miles waited for Connor every morning by the front gate. He thought about Kara, about the accident, about the 4 seconds every morning and the corner table and the life he'd built to be small enough to protect. He texted Selena. "I saw it." Her response came in under 2 minutes. "I know. I'm sorry. My communications director is working on it, trying to get it taken down, arguing right of privacy. She thinks she can get it removed by end of day." He looked at the message. Then he looked at Miles, who was eating his eggs in the particular absorbed way of someone who was thinking about something unrelated to eggs. The dinosaur pajamas again. The complicated hair. He typed, "Can we talk later?" Not text. A pause. Then, "Of course, tonight, if that works." He put his phone in his pocket and sat down across from his son and drank his coffee and was present for the Saturday morning in the way he needed to be. Miles had opinions about the papier-mâché volcano's eruption mechanism that required extended discussion. Grayson listened. He was good at listening. He'd learned. But underneath the Saturday, underneath the listening and the eruption mechanism and the cartoons Miles negotiated for after breakfast, something had shifted in his chest. Something that had been warm and careful and growing in the particular protected way of plants that are kept indoors was now feeling the draft from a door he hadn't opened. He'd known her world had weight. He'd told her so himself on the street in November. He'd meant it then. He was trying to mean it now. But meaning something in the abstract was different from meaning it at 7:30 on a Saturday morning while your 6-year-old ate eggs in his dinosaur pajamas and your photograph was somewhere on the internet being captioned as a mystery. He called her that evening after Miles was in bed. "The column took the image down 4 hours ago," she said. No preamble. "My director sent a cease and desist. The outlet caved faster than expected. They usually do when they don't have legal standing." A beat. "It had about 6,000 views before it came down. That's not nothing, but it's also not—" "Selena." She stopped. "6,000 views is not what I want to talk about." A beat of silence. Careful. "Okay." He was sitting on the couch with the guitar beside him. He'd taken to keeping it there, in reach. And the apartment was quiet around him the way it got quiet after Miles was down. The lamp in the corner. The crayon drawing still on the coffee table, which he hadn't moved because he hadn't wanted to. "I want to be honest with you," he said. "Please." "This morning, when I saw that picture..." He stopped, looked for the right words, and decided the right words were the true ones, not the polished ones. "My first thought was about Miles, about his name getting attached to this, about the school on Franklin Street and what happens when things like that get found." "That's a reasonable thought." "My second thought," he continued, "was that I wanted to pull back, create distance, not because I want distance." His voice was even, but the effort behind it was real. "Because distance is what I know how to do when something feels like a threat." I understand that." "I know you do." He turned the guitar pick in his hand. He'd found it in the case, the same one from grad school, its edges worn. "And I know it's not fair to tell you I want to keep going and then flinch every time your world intrudes on mine. Those two things can't coexist indefinitely." She was quiet for a moment, not the managed quiet, the real one. "You're telling me you're scared," she said. "I'm telling you I'm scared, and I'm telling you that I'm aware of it and that I'm not sure yet which one wins." He pressed the pick between his thumb and forefinger. "I thought you should know the whole thing, not just the version where I say it's fine and we keep going." "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saying the whole thing. Does it—" he paused. "Does it change anything for you?" She took her time with this. He could hear her breathing, could hear the ambient of her apartment, the 22nd floor quiet. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I said to you, about keeping my world separate, about protection." A pause. I think I've been using it in both directions, protecting the people I care about from my world and protecting myself from what happens if someone fully sees it and decides it's too much. And I think if you decide this is too much, that's a real and legitimate decision. Her voice was careful but not fragile. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. You have Miles. That's not abstract. That's the most concrete thing there is. He held the phone and sat with this. The lamp, the crayon drawing, the guitar. When Kara died, he said, and he almost never said her name like this, in sentences about the fear rather than the love, the hardest part wasn't the grief. The grief was enormous, but it had a shape. I could feel the edges of it. The hardest part was after, when I realized I'd have to open up again sometime. That being alive meant eventually being at risk again. He looked at the coffee table, at the careful crayon wheels. I decided Miles was a good reason to not do that. Good enough to last a long time. He is a good reason, she said. He's also 6 years old and he drew you a picture with wheels on the chair because he wanted to get it right. His voice had something rough in it, the roughness of a thing you're saying for the first time in the shape it actually has. And I'm sitting here on a Saturday night after he's been asleep for 40 minutes, and He stopped. Then, I miss you. I haven't seen you since Thursday, and it's Saturday, and I miss you, and that terrifies me more than any photograph. The silence on the line was complete, long enough that he wondered, briefly, if he'd said too much. Then he heard her exhale. Grayson? Her voice was different, not the boardroom voice, not the cafe voice, not the communications director voice, something beneath all of those. I've been sitting in my apartment since the photo came down, and I've been telling myself that if you needed to step back, I would understand, that I would be fine. A pause. I've been telling myself that since October, actually, that if this became too complicated, I would let you go without it costing me anything. And it would cost me quite a lot. She said it plainly, the way she said true things, without drama, which somehow made it more dramatic. I'm not good at this. I want to be clear about that. I don't do it well. I manage things instead of feeling them. I work instead of reaching out. I leave before I can be left. She paused. My therapist would say, I've just described my entire relational pattern in one sentence. She sounds thorough. Exhaustingly. A beat, and under it something that wasn't quite a laugh but was related to one. I'm not going to be easy to be with. I want you to know that. Not because of the chair or the company or the board politics or the press. Because She searched for it. I've been alone long enough that I've gotten good at it, and getting good at something makes you want to keep doing it. I know that feeling. I imagine you do. He looked at the guitar. He thought about the hall closet and the years it had spent behind the stroller. He thought about the 3 chords and the enormous, unjustified confidence of a younger version of himself who hadn't yet learned to be afraid of the things he wanted. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I'm telling you I'm scared, not that I'm leaving. Those are different things. She was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. They are. I need you to know the scared part because I don't want to hide it and have it make decisions behind my back. She paused. That's actually very healthy. I've had a good therapist too. Apparently. The Saturday quiet held them through the phone line. 2 people in 2 apartments across a December city, the distance between them measured in blocks and in all the other ways distance gets measured. Miles's eruption mechanism, he said after a moment. What? For the volcano. He's decided it needs a hand squeeze pump, like a blood pressure cuff but for lava. He explained this to me for 20 minutes this morning. She was quiet, and then she said, that is actually an excellent engineering solution. That's what I told him. Is he going to build it? I've committed to helping him try, this coming Friday. He paused. I know this is... I'm thinking about the fact that I've talked about him this much, and you've never met him, she finished quietly. Yeah. The word sat there between them. Neither of them moved it. I'm not rushing anything, he said carefully. I notice it. The gap between the part of my life I talk about and the part you've actually seen. I notice it too, she said. After a moment,
I notice it more than I let on. He didn't say anything. He let her have the space she'd created. I'm in front of your board on Wednesday, she said, the shift in topic, the kind that isn't really a shift. She was moving toward something by moving away from it first. Warren Holt's motion. I've been preparing the counterargument for 2 weeks. A breath. I want to tell you something about it. Tell me. When I took over the company, after my father, I built the strategy around a 10-year horizon. Every decision I make, I'm asking what this looks like in 10 years. Holt looks at 2. He looks at the fastest route to the best number, and he doesn't look at what the numbers are standing on. She paused. He's good at his job. I want to be honest about that. He's not stupid or malicious. He just has a shorter view than I do. And the board? Split. I have the votes I need as long as I don't lose anyone before Wednesday. Her voice was steady, professional, but he could hear the thing underneath. The same thing that was underneath when she talked about her father, about the company as the thing she was keeping alive. I'm not going to lose the vote, but I'm going to have to stand in that room and defend something I believe in to people who are calculating whether to believe in it based on what it costs them in the short term. You've done that before. Every quarter. She was quiet for a moment. The difference is, I want to tell you about it this time, before. She said this with care. I don't usually do that. Tell people before. It means... She stopped. It means you care about the outcome, he said, and about someone knowing. Yes, simply. Both of those things. He sat with it, with the privilege of being the person she'd told before, and with the weight of what that meant, in the context of a woman who had kept her world separate for years. It was not a small thing. He understood it was not a small thing. You're going to handle it, he said. You keep saying that. I keep meaning it. A pause. Then quietly, I know. They talked for another hour, not about the photograph or the board or the fear or any of the things with weight. They talked the way they talked in the cafe, the lateral conversations, the ones that moved through things sideways and arrived somewhere true. He told her about the time he'd tried to teach himself guitar from a YouTube video series and had quit after 17 minutes. She told him about her first board meeting at 26, standing at the front of a room full of men who were looking at her the way people look at things they've already decided about. How she'd been so nervous she'd clicked her pen 37 times during the CFO's presentation and hadn't noticed until someone pointed it out. What did you do? He asked. I put the pen down and I said, 37 seems about right for this material. And I kept going. He laughed, the real laugh, the one that came from somewhere genuine. It landed. That's all I needed it to do. You're very good at that. At what? Landing things. Saying the exact right thing at the right moment. A pause. Not always, she said. Not with things that matter to me. Those I usually manage to make more difficult than they need to be. You're doing fine right now. The bar is very low right now. We're on the phone. We had this whole conversation, he said. The scared part, the cost part, the telling me before part. That wasn't... He searched for it. That was the exact right thing. The whole time. She was quiet for a moment, long enough that he wondered. Then, you're easier to be honest with than most people. Why? Because you don't need me to be something. You don't need me to be the CEO or the inspiration or the cautionary tale or the symbol of anything. A pause. You just need me to be at the cafe on Thursday and to fix cantilever calculations. Structurally essential work. Critical, he agreed. When they finally said goodnight, she said it first, the way she usually did, the ending of things a form of control she still needed. He sat on the couch for a while with the guitar across his knee and the apartment quiet around him. He played his 3 chords in sequence. Slowly. The sound of them in the room. He thought about Wednesday in the boardroom and Warren Holt and the 10-year view versus the 2-year view, and he thought about how the same argument existed in his own chest. The short view that said, protect everything you have by keeping it small, and the longer view that was harder to see clearly, but that he was beginning to believe had more in it. More room, more of the things worth having. He played the G chord one more time. Then he put the guitar down and went to check on Miles. who was asleep with one arm off the bed, in the particular abandoned way of a child who has spent himself completely on the day and has nothing left to hold back. Grayson stood in the doorway for a moment. His son, the thing he'd built his life around and through and because of, the most concrete thing there was. He went to bed. Monday morning, Miles said, apropos of what appeared to be nothing, eating his triangle toast. "Is Selena coming to see the volcano?" Grayson looked at him over his coffee. "What?" "The pump volcano, on Friday." He said this in the tone of someone raising a scheduling matter. "I thought maybe she could come." Grayson sat with this for a moment. He thought about the distance between what he'd said on the phone Saturday night. "I noticed the gap between the part I talk about and the part you've actually seen," and this 6-year-old across his kitchen table calmly proposing to close it over toast. "I'll ask her," he said. Miles nodded, satisfied. "Tell her it'll be messy," he said seriously, "because of the lava." "I'll tell her." "And that she should wear something she doesn't care about. Very practical." "I know," Miles said, and finished his toast. That morning, Grayson texted her. "Miles wants to know if you'd like to come see the volcano on Friday. He says to tell you it'll be messy and to wear something you don't care about." He waited. He was at his desk by then, the Clover Street file open, not reading it. Her response took 11 minutes, which he spent not watching his phone. "Tell Miles I accept, and that I appreciate the advance warning about the lava." He looked at the message for a moment. He thought about the photograph and the gossip column and the 6,000 views and the distance between safe and alive. He thought about the guitar in the hall closet for 3 years and the watercolor case at the bottom of the studio closet and 2 people who'd gotten very good at managing the things they were afraid of. He typed back, "He'll be thrilled. Fair warning, he'll also want to explain the entire engineering process in detail." Her reply was immediate this time. "I have sat through 4-hour board meetings. I think I can handle a 6-year-old's engineering presentation." Then, after a beat, "I'm looking forward to it." He put the phone down and opened the Clover Street file and actually read it this time. And outside his office window, December moved through the city with its cold and its thin light. And in 3 days, Selena Cross would stand in a boardroom and defend the thing she'd built to people who were measuring it in the wrong units. And in 4 days, she was coming to an apartment in Ridgemont to watch a child with a hand-squeeze pump try to simulate volcanic activity with red paint. These 2 things were both true, and they were both hers, and they were both about to be in the same life. He was scared. He was also, for the first time in a long time, the kind of scared that has something on the other side of it. He worked through the morning. He sent the invoice he'd been forgetting to send for 3 weeks. He fixed the cantilever in the Clover Street load model, the one that had the wrong factor, that he'd caught because he'd been thinking about a spreadsheet across a cafe table 8 weeks ago. He fixed it and ran the corrected numbers, and they were good. The beam would hold. The load would transfer cleanly. The wall the client wanted to remove could come out, and everything above it would stay up. Good bones, he thought, worth the risk of the south wall. He sent Theo the corrected model and closed the file and sat for a moment in his office in the December light, thinking about Friday and about the volcano and about the woman who ran a $4 billion company and had said, "I'm looking forward to it," in a text message about a first grader's papier-mâché project with a hand-squeeze pump. Then he got up and went to a meeting, because the work kept going the way work does, regardless of what else is true, and that was also, in its own way, one of the things he'd learned to rely on.